Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Developmental Education Program Survey Overview. During this session, during this webinar, we'll provide select highlights of the DEPS, as well as offer you the opportunity to ask questions, and we'll address any muddy points that you may have with the survey thus far. Before I get started, my name is Keelan Morgan. I serve as the Program Specialist at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board in the Division of College Readiness and Success, specifically for developmental education. And I have my colleague with me, our reporting guru, for one of our reporting gurus for developmental education, Dr. Yuji Kim.
Hi everyone, my name is Yuji Kim. I'm a program director in research and analysis team in the division of strategic planning and funding. If you have any issues with the DEPS accessing, or if you need the links, if you can't find the Qualtrics email, please let me know and I'll do my best to handle it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. And she's been quite essential to the team. And it's good to be able to put a face definitely for you all in the field with those who you interact with at the Higher Education Coordinating Board. And Dr. Kim oversees the DEPS. So if you have any questions or concern, as she said, feel free to reach out. Jumping right in, an overview of the presentation. We'll talk about the description, just a reminder of exactly what the DEPS is. I'll go over a couple of best practices and provide you a little bit of support. And then I'll delve into helping you understand what's changed in the document. If you are new to the DEPS arena, everything will be new to you. However, we have some historians of the DEPS among us that I saw as I was scrolling through the names in the waiting room before I admitted everyone. And for you, it'll mainly be just those things that have changed and or were modified. And last but not least, we always share our contact information with you. So just a little bit of background on the DEPS. So just know firsthand that participation in the DEPS is required. In place of those exhaustive annual developmental education plans that institutions once had to submit to the coordinating board, the DEPS took its place in 2010 to streamline the information and the way in which we receive the more granular information beyond CBM reporting as it relates to the developmental education options offered at your respective institutions. As I just said, note that the DEPS supplements the quantitative data that we receive from the institutions on the CBM reports, particularly the CBM 002 report, which is specifically regarding the Texas Success Initiative, and we triangulate that data with a number of other CBM reports. And part of the DEPS is to start to develop longitudinal data on trends in developmental education. This data is very, very paramount to the work that we do. Not only do we make it available public, if you didn't have an opportunity to view the webinar that we did on our DEPS analysis and trends, it's available on the Texas Higher Education Board's YouTube page. If you just search DEPS, you will find it. So the DEPS is not only important, like I said, to help identify trends in developmental education, but it's also helpful in how we develop policy as it relates to developmental education. So again, the CBM data that we receive is only limited in terms of how many questions we can ask regarding developmental education. So our DEPS is our supplement to that to make sure that we have as much high quality data as we can when we're making those important decisions. And also, it helps inform professional development needs for the state. As many of you are aware, we have a robust professional development program. Most recently, our grantee, Austin Community College, led our Texas Co-Requisite project, which they did a phenomenal job and provided a variety of professional development to the state. And we will have our professional development options coming available again very soon. So be on the lookout for those. So here's some helpful tips as best practices. And I want to say first and foremost In my role at the Higher Education Coordinating Board, I just want to let you know that I empathize with you. In my last role at an institution, I sat where you sat in terms of, I sat where you in terms of, I sat where you sat in regards to actually completing the DEPS on behalf of an institution. So like you, I know when you received that PDF copy, if you participated in our review of the DEPS prior to launch, your head was probably spinning like, what are they doing? But know that we work very hard to scrutinize the DEPS and review each question annually to make sure that we're asking the most pertinent questions to get the data that we need to make those critical decisions as it relates to developmental education, because we know that it has a high impact on students. So as I go through the different categories of the DEPS, I know first off, we've already received some comments in terms of this is a very long document. However, as a preface to this year's DEPS, we are in an unprecedented time, and that is the time of COVID. So if you've already received your email, you would have seen that you received 2 links this year, one specifically related to COVID practices, COVID placement practices, and then the other, which is our traditional DEPS. So here's some notes. Oh, let me actually go back. A couple other highlights with the best practices. I encourage you to break this up. This works, the DEPS responses work best when those who are the experts for that particular area answer the questions. So if it's the math-related questions, I suggest you farm those out to the math department. If it's the IRW or ELAR, English, reading, writing, and I use all of those because they're now used in tandem as we transition to the TSIA2. You farm those questions out there. And then the placement questions, definitely bring in your advisor, your advising director into this conversation to make sure that we have a very accurate understanding of what your practices and what your operation looks like. Partner with your registrar to ensure that in Section A, and I'll talk about it not specifically, but just right here, that when you're looking at that co-requisite data, that it's the best estimate of co-requisite enrollments based on your fall 2020 census date. And I have fall 2020 census date bolded, anticipating the question from an institution that will read something to the effect of, we don't have our 002 report just yet. We run that next semester. We don't have this data. So in advance, the idea of your best estimate of co-requisite enrollments is to work with your registrar to see what that snapshot of co-requisite enrollments look like as of your fall 2020 census date. Understand that your official data of your institution will be from your CBM reports, i.e. your CBM 002 report. So the data that you're giving us here is literally data that we have to use for research and general reporting purposes in terms of getting data to the legislature, particularly as we're about to go into the legislative session. However, official data from your institution is captured through CBM reporting. And last, the glossary. Dr. Yuji Kim has developed a very extensive glossary. She added to it this year with some of those, with a lot, based on the feedback that we received from the field with the review of the DEPS prior to launch. So we encourage you to click this link, download that glossary, and distribute it with the PDF copy of the DEPS if you do have multiple people involved in this. And that's only to make sure that those involved understand some of the colloquial terms that we use in academia in the context of the DEPS specifically. And last, if you need any assistance with the DEPS, we are here to help. So you should have already received your DEPS official email from the Texas Education Coordinating Board, and the official window is September 24th through October 30th. If you're the primary DEPS contact for your institution and you have not yet received the email that I'm referencing, I would first suggest that you check your junk or spam folder. Our DEPS emails, we use Qualtrics to administer the survey, and they originate from the email address specified there at noreply@qemailserver.com. So if your institution automatically filters out those emails, you may not receive it in your inbox. And in some cases, you might check your junk spam folder and you're the designated primary contact and you still have not received that email. If that is the case, at your earliest convenience, reach out to Dr. Kim so she can provide you support and provide you with your customized email for your institution so you can get started on this work. This year's DEPS has two surveys. One is specifically related to COVID-19 placements. The other is the more traditional DEPS that if you've completed the DEPS in the past that you'll be used to. And note, the COVID-19 placement link is the same for all institutions. However, your regular DEPS link, when you click on it, it'll almost say something like, it'll have your institution's name on that landing page. If your institution's name is not on that landing page, when you click on your second link, definitely reach out to Dr. Kim. We want to make sure that you're completing the correct survey and that we have the data received accordingly. A highlight of the sections of the regular DEPS. So section A is specifically, sections A through C are specifically focused on co-requisite models for both math and ELAR. And section D, Developmental Education Curriculum Support. Section E, College Preparatory Course and Texas College Bridge. Section F has COVID-19 course delivery. So here you notice everything regarding placement is in the COVID-19 placement survey. However, when it comes to course delivery, it's in the traditional DEPS. And the idea there was we split it out to possibly help you demarcate where those pieces need to go to, because course delivery will be primarily on the faculty side with their responses, whereas placement, you may be able to, again, like I said, we encourage you to bring in your advising director, particularly into that conversation to capture that information. And last but not least, we always give you the opportunity to provide us with feedback, and we have open-ended responses in section G. Jumping into a couple of the modified items that we have, and for items B6 and C3, it's exactly the same. So the slide that I'm on now, as well as the next slide, the modification is exactly the same. The only difference is this one is specifically for math, and the C3, C section is, C3 is focused on integrated reading and writing. So with this one, we've updated the options in this one to be more in line with research that's categorizing the types of supports often combined with co-requisite models. So for this one, we've added two new options: group intervention. Students participate together in an NCBO, such as tutoring or supplemental instruction, and then a self-paced intervention option where students participate independently, however, still within the context of an NCBO, for instance, tutoring and things like that. And again, C3 is just the integrated reading and writing update to that question. So as you can see, we've modified a couple of items, but we have a gauntlet of new items. And again, the majority of the new items are resulting from COVID. However, some of them are in the traditional DEPS. And section C10, or number C10, and it's the TSIA 2.0, will launch on January 11th. And this question, we want to get at understanding with the combination of reading and writing with the TSIA version 2.0 on January 11th. Has your institution started to have those conversations about potentially modifying this institutional policy on the placement of students into particularly reading and writing intensive courses that are currently paired with college level courses in a co-requisite model fashion. For instance, if you currently have an IRW course that's paired with a reading only history course, have you really thought through what that looks like for the students now presenting an ELAR score? So we really want to get at if those conversations are being had. And if yes, you'll get an additional question, which is C11, which is describe the changes in your institutional policy. So we'll really, again, we're trying to understand how institutions are responding to the integration of the reading and writing sections on the TSIA2 in terms of placement. Section E, with the Texas College Bridge, pretty straightforward. Has your institution considered the Texas College Bridge? And we're aware of it, but we're having the conversation. And if you answer yes, you'll go into the next question, which will officially, ask you, have you officially signed on to it? So the first part, the notion is, are you aware of Texas College Bridge? Has your institution considered it or had a conversation? And then E2 follows up with, have you formally signed on to deliver Texas College Bridge? And you'll see here that Texas College Bridge is in blue and it's underlined. So if you're not familiar with what I'm speaking of when I say Texas College Bridge, more often than not, your institution may not do it. However, I encourage you to click on that link, and it links directly to the Texas College Bridge website that's put together by TEA, Texas Education Agency. And then last but not least, related to the Texas College Bridge, if you have formally signed on to the Texas College Bridge, what does your institution require to demonstrate successful completion of the Texas College Bridge as it relates specifically to the TSI exemption? And I'm not going to go into detail regarding Texas College Bridge, but with our multiple measures webinar, I believe, no, with the DEPS analysis webinar, I get them confused. We have so many webinars out there, but there's one specifically where Texas College Bridge is in the title, and there's more detailed information on Texas College Bridge. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Texas College Bridge, you can click the link that's there, or you can visit our webinar again, which can be found on the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's YouTube website. And here, this generally, what types of college prep course options does your institution offer for the year 2021? And if your institution doesn't offer or partner with an ISD to offer a college prep option, you won't check anything there. So it's perfectly fine to leave that portion blank if you do not offer a college prep course option. And before I go on, I want to go back to, I forgot to make an important highlight during the general support to the DEPS. So the way that we've currently designed the DEPS is to where you can scroll through it. So if you've already clicked on your links, you notice that you were able to go from question to question to question without actually completing the question. So with the exception of those that were in a table where it was like yes, no, or was asking you to actually submit a response where it was very straight value beyond the qualitative, you were able to just move past those questions. Since then, we've had some internal discussions about some submissions that we've had with the DEPS where institutions have already like gun-ho got on this and got it done. However, we noticed that in some critical areas that where you selected yes, that took you into branching for another question, there was nothing provided in that additional response. Say for instance, with the college prep course, if you answered yes, and then we ask you, you signed on to that, to the Texas College Bridge, and then we ask you, what do you require for the TSI exemption? And you leave that blank. That becomes problematic in the quality of the data that we have. So you'll notice if you've already went in, you can scroll through, but we're going back and redoing the programming to create forced response situations. So that's gonna mean your primary mode to really assess what questions are on the DEPS will be the PDF copy. So I just want to be transparent about that. So if you go back and click the link, let's just say in a couple of days, and you can't move past that question because it's forcing you to give a response, that's why. And the decision was made solely because we want to make sure that we have not only accurate data, but we kind of help you make sure that there aren't any gaps in your responses. And the way that we've currently programmed it, we don't have what we call that edit check in place for you as of now. So in advance, if you go back in in a couple of days in the functionality of the DEPS, and when I refer to DEPS, I'm referring to both surveys, the COVID-19 placement survey, as well as the traditional DEPS. So both links, if the functionality is a little bit different, that's why. So speaking specifically regarding the traditional DEPS survey, this is section F, and this is focusing on COVID-19 course delivery. So how is your institution offering the following courses or supports in fall 2020? It's pretty straightforward. And again, in any of these scenarios, well, in this scenario, you have to offer the courses, but if it's not applicable, we don't have an option that says not applicable. You just would not check that particular box. So you'll see the specific options for math and IRW there, in-person, online, or hybrid. And if it's all three for DE standalone, you would check all three boxes for per subject area. So you can select more than one option. How did your institution offer its online or hybrid courses? Synchronous or asynchronous? And again, it's by subject area. In F3, what are your concerns related to the delivery of developmental education courses and supports impacted by COVID-19? And that's definitely where we really want your feedback. So if indeed you are the person that's assembling all of these responses and you're kind of breaking up the questions, be sure that everybody that you have on your team gives consideration to this question to make sure we have robust responses. And just in advance with the COVID-19 placement survey, a number of these questions almost mirror what you will see in the traditional DEPS. And we noticed that through the feedback that we got when we submitted the DEPS out to the field for review. It was, these questions are redundant, these questions are redundant. The main purpose of really trying to understand what's happening in this particular phase, given the waivers in place for the COVID-19 situation, is to identify, are there additional practices or are there additional indicators that could potentially serve as measures of college readiness beyond just the TSIA? Now, as you know, that in rule, it specifies that the TSIA score should be used in concert with additional indicators as determined by your institution. However, that's still to place the student within a range of developmental education courses, i.e., is the student going into a 1, 2, or 3 NCH support for the co-requisite model. But what we're really trying to get at here is particularly for those students that you're placing in college level courses without DE support. So for, as it relates to COVID-19 placement survey, your mindset should be focused on those students that you placed without directly into a college level course without DE support. And here we just capture for your review what those options are in terms of the placement options. And these are the same options that we've had several webinars on, and the same options that are published on the frequently asked questions page as it relates to TSI placement and COVID on the COVID FAQ page. And so all of that really, like all of the pros regarding the placement waivers, it's summed up here. That here are the alternative placement methods developed due to COVID-19, and these methods are in place from summer 2020 through summer 2021. We've received a number of questions regarding fall 2021 placements, and however, no decisions have been made as to whether or not these waivers will be in place for fall 2021. So when you get to the spring semester for fall 2021 placements, unless otherwise indicated, you will revert back to your traditional placement options per statute and TSI rule, and these options will not be available. So for summer 2020 through summer 2021, institutions may use additional factors such as high school GPA, high school course taking patterns, and/or other non-cognitive assessments to place non-exempt students directly into TSI liable college courses. What that means is you have the option to place students directly into a co-requisite model without a TSIA score, or if you have indicators that you've identified based on data and best practice that serve as indicators for college readiness, traditionally high school GPA, again, high school course taking pattern, that your institution may have decided, okay, a student has a 3.5 high school GPA and they had 4 years of math. We're going to allow them to go directly into college algebra without support. Under these circumstances and with the COVID-19 waiver, you are welcome to do that. However, as I go through this, you'll definitely be able to, we'll be able to capture that data, and I'll walk you through those processes as well. Beginning in summer 2020 through 21, if a student does not meet TSIA benchmarks or with an existing exemption or waiver, institutions may use additional factors. So here for summer 2020, did your institution modify its institutional policies on placement of non-exempt undergraduates into the following options? Pretty straightforward. So think about this as going from your spring 2020 placements into your summer 2020 placements. When COVID hit, did you have any shift in your policy that was related to specifically COVID-19 and the waivers that were extended to institutions? And the same thing for math. And this is specifically for summer. And then we transition to fall. Since the waivers came out kind of late in the spring semester, we're trying to, for the purposes of understanding the CBM data, we're trying to understand what institutions made this immediate shift, and then who, okay, we're going to follow business as usual for summer. However, for the fall, we made significant changes or just changes to our placement policies as it relates to the exemptions, the waivers extended to institutions. So note the difference between G1 and G2 are the semester. G1 refers to summer 2020, and G2 refers to fall 2020. G3, does your institutional have different placement criteria for placing students in algebra intensive path versus non-algebra intensive path? And again, pretty straightforward. And this essentially, do you have different test cut scores, completions of certain high school math courses for placement into college algebra, let's just say in comparison to a contemporary math course? And here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. So, and again, these questions are, I believe, reflected for, yeah, these questions are reflected for each subject area for math and IRW for both summer 2020 and fall 2020. So I just want to clarify that. So in summer 2020, what were the measures your institution used to place non-exempt undergraduate students in a first college level course, in a first college level algebra course, and again, without DE support? So we're not looking at students that are enrolled in co-requisite models. We're looking for you to tease out what you did specifically for those students that you placed into college level courses without DE support. So as it relates to their placement. And here are the full list of indicators that the most common ones that we saw. We had a number of institutions submit revised placement charts to us, and we categorized or we captured a number of indicators that institutions are using. However, if yours is not indicated here, if it's not captured in our pretty exhaustive list, and we actually add a couple of more, the IRW list is more exhaustive than this, you have that other. And in the other field, it'll open up to a text box where you can indicate exactly what it is that you used. And in advanced, if it's another score that's not here, keep the same format for us as we have here. That when you get to, if you indicate SAT math score, you'll be able to enter the actual text in terms of, okay, it's the SAT math score, that'll automatically populate, and then you'll enter the score. So if you're using something other than here, please provide us as granular as information to help us understand how you use that particular score and or assessment. The same thing for IRW for fall 2020. And Dr. Kim, real quick, I just want to clarify because we presented in the slides that math for summer and then IRW for fall, but for each semester it adds both, correct?
That's correct.
Awesome, thank you. And as you can see here, I'll just highlight not going through all the pros I gave on the math, but particularly if you are using considerations for GED and HiSET, there's been a considerable amount of conversation, particularly in the AEL world as it relates to the GED and HiSET being able to be used as a college readiness indicator with the revamped of both of those assessments. And as you know, as well may know, we have, I can't remember the exact, I believe it's one of the House bills, 1891, don't quote me on that, but it commissions a study, and that's where we're actually looking at the HiSET and GED scores in terms of how they compare, how those students go on to do in terms of with their gateway level courses to see, is there a correlation between the GED score or an HiSET score as it relates to students being college ready? Because if you're not familiar with that world now, students who take the GED, they take the GED. GED actually has college readiness indicators built into it as well as the HiSET. And if those students take those tests, they then have to take the TSIA as it relates to demonstrating college readiness, when in reality, they may have already met one of the college readiness benchmarks on one of those assessments. So if you are using those, it would be extremely helpful to us, because one of the challenges that we have is that particular population of students where that data is captured and then they show up on the on our institutions, at our institutions in terms of being able to triangulate the data. We've had some challenges with that. So it will definitely help us increase the sample size in which we can look at to, again, determine if there's any correlation of college readiness between those tests and the TSIA benchmarks. So again, always in an effort to reduce barriers for students in this world of post-secondary education, if your institution accepts, particularly I'm speaking to our community colleges, if you capture high set scores and GED scores, we strongly encourage you to consider using those as part of your placement measures and capture that within your data so we can use that, again, we can use that data to help inform state policy and with that report. And I see a number of questions coming in. At the end, I think I only have a few more slides. I'll scroll back through the questions and capture those. And Dr. Kim, if you could go through and just kind of get some select questions for a quick Q&A, I'll let you ask those to me. Thank you. And then here, so please write the name and score of the highest math course your institution used to place non-exempt undergraduates in a non-algebra intensive path. So here, if you're using, let's just say the students, we want them to have Algebra 2 and we want them to have a course grade of B. This is where you would enter that information. So again, the name of the highest math course, 1, and then the grade of the highest math course. If you're not using these two in tandem, you can leave the grade blank. However, the idea here is to provide for those that were using the highest level math course in tandem or in conjunction with the grade. And as you can see, the more I explain this, the more complex it gets. Dr. Morales-Vell and I had a conversation earlier this morning regarding the use of multiple measures and how complex it can get. So we have some institutions that if the student has 4 years of math, we're certain in that 4 years of math included college algebra. It's indicative of college readiness. That student can go on to a college level course with no support. We have some institutions, the student has to have up through pre-calculus as the highest level of math. And in that pre-calculus class, they had to make a grade of a B. So this is where you would capture all of those nuances. And again, if you have non-cognitive assessments, if you've indicated that you've used non-cognitive assessments in your placement decisions, this pops up just as well as it does for if you use consideration of grades. So with the name of the non-cognitive assessment and then the score that you used. And again, in all of these, and I'm anticipating the emails that we'll get from the field even after the webinar, and that's perfectly fine. But we're looking at those students that you placed in a college level course, essentially with the under the guidelines or the waivers that were provided due to COVID-19 in a college level course without DE support. And again, if it's an indicator that we have not captured, this is your opportunity to let us know what it is and then that score, if any. And when I talked about it, when I was on the IRW slide, when I said it was an exhaustive list and definitely keep that pairing, please let us know as detailed as possible what the name of the assessment is. If it's Myers-Briggs, type out Myers-Briggs. Please don't just put MBTI. Although that's, and I know some of y'all see some smiling faces, that's terminology I'm very familiar with, but we have a whole analysis department that will be going over this data, and we're trying to make it as easy to code and categorize as possible. If using high school information for placement, pretty straightforward. What is the maximum number of years since high school graduation your institution will accept? If there's no limit, write NA. what we're getting at here is these placement options, they are for all of your students. So we encourage you to apply your placement decisions from a very equity mindset. So we want it to where you're giving great consideration to the various types of students your institution serves, and how the placement decision affects that student. And then on top of that, particularly for those returning adult students, if you've been out of school for 10 years, would you use the high school GPA as indicative of college readiness or their math course taking pattern? Or does it look a little different for that student in an effort to do your best to accurately place them? So if you're using high school information for placement, what's the maximum number of years since graduation your institution will accept? So if the high school GPA is more than 3 years old, we can't use it. That answer would be 3. If there's no consideration for that, you would put NA. How did your institution use selected measures to place non-exempt undergraduate students in first college level courses without DE support? The options are there. My institution combined specific measures, or we used a single measure. And note, these questions will repeat for non-exempt high school students as well, for considerations of dual credit. And this is where we get into those questions. So all of the questions that I pretty much just went through for summer 2020 and fall 2020, we repeat those questions specifically in the context of for those high school students that were non-exempt for TSI. So I know we received a lot of feedback with the review of the DEPS that what is this non-exempt high school student, because that's traditionally language that we use in statute and rule as it relates to non-exempt undergraduate students. But note in this case, for placement as it relates with the COVID-19 placement waivers, there is a such thing as a non-exempt high school student, and they can still be placed. And that's even beyond the rules set forth in dual credit rule 4.85. And again, for summer 2020, as well as for fall 2020. And again, did your institution use the same policies as for summer 2020 to place the students in fall 2020? Again, specifically related to non-exempt high school students. And again, that's in college level courses with no DE support. We said in many of our webinars and responded to a number of questions to the field at the onset of the implementation of the waivers that institutions have the capacity to place high school students in co-requisite models. However, the developmental education portion of that co-requisite model would not be funded. So in all the conversations that we've had with institutions across the field, we didn't find that to be a practice that a number of institutions were using. However, for the purposes of these questions, we're specifically focused on those high school students you placed in college level courses without DE support and without passing TSIA scores. So that's another layer that you can get your mindset in. If the student would have traditionally placed into developmental education, yet we placed them into a college level course without required support, those are the groups of that's the group of students that we're looking at with these series of questions in the COVID placement waiver. Again, mirrored from the previous section in summer 2020, again, as it relates to non-exempt high school students. The same for summer, and again, both of these questions will be asked for each semester, both summer 2020 and each subject area for both math and IRW. So that actually brings me to the end of the highlights that we have for the that we wanted to highlight in the DEPS. And I'll now yield to Dr. Kim for some of the questions that were posed.
Sure.
And definitely feel free. She's the architect and designer behind the DEPS and very well knowledgeable in terms of our intent of the questions. So if there's something that you have to add or you just want to take the question, feel free.
Okay. We had a couple of questions. The first one was question regarding mismatch between the data from the DEPS and CBM. And we heard a lot from the institutions that's the case. Because we, as you can imagine, I know, was it Amanda? Someone answered which was correct, because the timing of the DEPS and timing of this CBM reporting submission is different. So the numbers change a bit. And also what we capture from CBM and how we calculate the number of students in correctness model, that's more complicated because there are certain calculations that we look at, for example, exemptions, waivers, and various factors that go into CBM calculation. So there probably will be a mismatch between the CBM data and the DEPS. And the other question maybe I could answer was, and I know Melissa, you're here too, so if I don't answer correctly, please join in. The question related to ESOL waiver, I'm pretty sure there's no change regarding the ESOL waiver, so please continue to use that if your institution is using the ESOL waiver. So I'll pass on the next question to you, Keelan.
And real quick, before you do that, jumping in on the timing, very spot on in terms of the DEPS data versus CBM data. I just want to reiterate, your CBM data is the official data of your institution. So in the opening slides for best practices, I shared, get with your registrar to provide a best estimate. On the Developmental Education Program webpage on the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board's website, you'll find the House Bill 2223 calculations. So if you're not familiar with that resource, it's definitely a resource available to you to literally walk you through the calculation. And my contact information is there. If you need a direct link to that resource, if you can't find it on our webpage, just shoot me a quick email and I'll go pull it and send it directly to you. And we have them where we've captured the zip codes that should be used for each block in terms of the calculation. For both community and technical colleges have one page, and then four-year institutions have another, I didn't mean a page, they have their own workbook that they can use, and then community and colleges, community and technical colleges have a workbook that they can use to do their calculations, and four-year institutions have a workbook they can use to do their calculations. And again, it's inclusive of all of the zip codes, and it's very detailed to help you walk through getting a best estimate. And when we launched this in 2018, we found that institutions who used it, even when we compared the numbers that they presented against their official CBM data, the greatest margin of error that we had between 18 institutions that I looked at was 3%. So it's a pretty comprehensive document to help you walk through essentially an ad hoc procedure of what you would traditionally do through your 002 reporting.
Awesome. And Keelan, the question for you was, have we released the cost scores for TSIA too?
I knew that was coming. The current released, no. Are they available for you to see? Yes. They're currently published in the September 4th version of the Texas Register for public comment. and they'll be available for comment, I believe, through October 4th. So if you would like to see what the proposed cut scores are for the TSIA2, you can just Google Texas Register, and in the September 4th version, if you go into the HTML version, you'll just scroll down to, it has the different agencies that submitted rule changes, and you'll find the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And once you click on that, I can't remember the exact section, but it's in our submission for rule changes in the September 4th version of the Texas Register. And one thing that I really want, you can go out and look, but in advance, a highlight of those scores, you'll notice that whereas with the current writing section of the TSIA, there's a second chance pass option, so to speak. So if the student doesn't meet that initial college readiness benchmark on the, we refer to it as the CRC, the CRC, College Readiness Classification Test, the first 20 questions. So if they don't demonstrate college readiness there, they go into the diagnostic, then they can work their way to the essay, and pending the combination of those scores, even if they don't meet it the first time, pending what they do on the diagnostic, if they get an ABE level score of 5 or higher in conjunction with an essay score of 5 or higher, that student is then considered college ready. However, with the TSIA2, we've implemented, or we're proposing, a second pass option for math as well. And that option will still exist for ELAR. So now the diagnostics for the assessment will become even more important for students to take seriously, because pending their performance, they'll have the opportunity to demonstrate college readiness as well in the subject area of math. And the details are spelled out in the Texas Register.
Okay. Next question was specific to DEPS survey, question F1. Kelly, if you want to go back to the slide, that's slide number 15.
15,
yeah.
Gotcha.
So the question is regarding whether the standalone DE course, that's including the lower level DE course as well.
Yes. So, well, I'm assuming when you say lower level, you're referring to essentially how you place those with an ABE level score of 1 through 4, if that's the context. But standalone DE courses would include those courses as well.
And next question is from Tricia. I'm not too familiar with what the ACT exempting scores are. The question, I'll just read to you. Mm-hmm. Are there plans to review ACT exempting scores? Since SAT no longer uses a total score, why do we need to still use the ACT composite score?
The score, so essentially it's not apples to apples. Each individual test provider does their own validity studies as it relates to what those college readiness benchmarks for that assessment are. So until ACT decides not to use a composite score, there will always be a composite score as it relates to consideration for college readiness, because that's what their college readiness indicator per their validity studies show. When the SAT redesigned their test, they moved away from that. It's not something that we pull out and set in terms of running their data against TSI. We legitimately use their college readiness benchmark.
And next question is, what if an institution has more the options that does not match with the 2 options in question G10? Let's see.
I think I'm getting close. In theory, it's one or the other. Either you use one or you use more. So if you used a single measure, and if you combine measures, that can be 2+. Although here, we just use, in our conjunction, we just use 2. If you used more considerations than that, you would have combined specific measures to decide on the placement of the student. And I guess at this point too, because we have, we're available, we had set till 1:30. In a systematic way, if I'm not capturing the context of a question and you're still on, feel free to unmute yourself. I just don't want it to become too overwhelming in terms of everybody unmuting themselves at once. But if we can manage it in a systematic way, if I'm missing the context of your question, feel free to unmute yourself and provide more clarity so I can provide you with the accurate response. Or you can feel free, just shoot me an email and we can set up a time to talk offline, either or. Back to you, Eugene.
Okay. So 2 more questions from Rahel. So are we held to the 75% based on the DEPS survey or CBM? I'm going to say both. Do you have any extra?
It's CBM data. So again, your official reporting mechanism to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board is your CBM data. Your data that you provide us via the DEPS complements the CBM data, and it's more the qualitative responses and more granular responses we get about your operation. However, when it comes to your official, what we would reach out to you, we've had a series of emails. Most recently, we had a series of emails regarding House Bill 2223 calculations go out directly to reporting officials from Dr. Melissa Humphreys and her team. So again, the official calculation is based on CBM data. That's why I'm trying to stress as best I can that the information you provide data-wise, the quantitative data that you provide to us via the DEPS is a best estimate, but it won't be the data that we use as far as whether or not you met your enrollment percentage. And just while I'm on that point, there has been no rescinding of the 75% threshold for this fall. So institutions still are expected to have placed 75% of their students enrolled in developmental education in co-requisite models. And just to reiterate, it starts with the developmental education enrollment, particularly those who are not exempt from House Bill 2223.
Okay. Last question, I believe. I'll just read the question to you, Gillian. Will TA ever offer English 3 or Algebra 2 star again? If not, can those exemptions be removed?
In theory, they never stopped offering it. It became optional. So we won't remove this. We won't remove the exemptions for the simple fact that it's still a valid test that can be used for the determination of college readiness, and they're the only 2 tests in the EOC block of tests that students could possibly take that have a college readiness implication for higher ed. So those will always remain until TEA does away with them. But just at face value, it's not, TEA didn't stop offering the English 3 and Algebra 2. They just made it optional for school districts, and school districts can opt in to offer English 3 or Algebra 2, which we know that as with a number of the students that we work with, what's that age-old cliche? Students don't do optional. So a number of only a handful of school districts opt to offer the English 3 and Algebra 2 STAR exams for their students. And I do understand that that can be confusing for students. And again, I've sat in your place overseeing advising for underprepared students at an institution. And my first indicator when they tell me about, well, I took this particular test, or I took this course and I was able to do dual credit. Those are two very different things. Qualifying and participation in dual credit is not an indicator of college readiness as it relates to the THECB college readiness indicators.
Oh, we're getting more questions. In 2021, is that the year that goes to 100% co-requisite?
Ooh, somebody went out there and looked at the Texas Register. So yes, the current proposal on the table is that for not this fall we're at 75%. So next fall, which will be 21-22, I think. Have I slept since then? Yes, 21-22 is the proposed year for 100% co-requisite enrollments.
And question, will there be a test score conversion chart from moving from TSIA, the current one, to TSIA 2?
There will be a concordance table for the TSIA 1 to 2. However, we do not anticipate it being available anytime soon. And I don't want to even give you a date because, as you know, with all the processes and the 2 shifts in launch date that we've had with the implications of the pandemic, a number of our processes have been delayed. But we do have there will be one. Unfortunately, I don't have a date for you today.
The last question. Okay, before moving into the last question, Linda, could you email me? Then I'll just forward you that calculation Excel sheet to you. I'll just leave my email. Okay, perfect. The last question from, I think, is from Gail. What is the institutional penalty for failing to reach the established benchmark?
And that's always a question that we receive. As of now, there is no said penalty. Annually, we're required to report to the governor's office on the updates regarding the House Bill 2223 statute. And we include institutions, how they met the enrollment, required enrollment percentages in that report. But though there are no stated implications, just understand that it is a state statute and this information does go directly to the governor's office. And particularly this year, it'll be included in our DE report, which will be provided to all of the legislators at the onset of the legislative session. So the answer to the question, there are no consequences, but I just give you that information that it's public information, and oftentimes public information and reports can be used for policy decisions and or conversations about funding and whatever else policymakers choose to use it for. And I did have a question that was submitted directly to me, and it was our registrar would only let us use TSI scores. So what will we use as our answer for questions like G9? And let me go back real quick. NA. And then for G10, UG, is there logic associated with this question? Do you know off the top of your head? Because I know we indicated that the best we could on the previous slides, but this one, so if indeed in their particular case, if they're only using TSIA scores and they would leave it blank?
Okay, so we can move forward if we leave it blank.
Yes, and usually we might need to get together when we go back and redo that force response logic to see those questions that might, if we don't have a not applicable, that it might create a situation.
Yeah, we tried sharing with our registrar the FAQs that showed where we could go into the code and use the other criteria for determining placement. But whenever we placed our students into classes based on that criteria, our registrar dropped them out. So, and just told us they would only accept TSIA scores. So we ended up managing to get everybody TSI tested, but that was our situation.
Thank you for sharing that. And unfortunately, we did hear some institutions in that same situation. However, from the stance of, I'll speak for Keelan. I'm not going to even put this one on the coordinating board. Policy is policy. Practitioners are provided with the policy to make the best decisions on behalf of students. So I would encourage you to make sure that our goal is not for reporting to drive practice. That's not our, that's not the way in which we want institutions to operate. Unfortunately, that happens, but you hear it firsthand from me that reporting should not drive policy, meaning if your registrar's interpretation of said policy, unless they're expressly given that authority by your president or your chief academic officer, and that's their sole responsibility and decision, that decision is usually made in terms of the guidance that faculty and staff are provided, and additional guidance has already been provided to our institutional reporting officials, which a number of registrars are a part of that group in terms of how to accurately report based on the options that have been provided with the COVID waivers. So it wasn't haphazardly that we developed policy and then it's someone on the back end saying we don't have a way to report this, so you can't do it. It's a combined package. So I would definitely, to the extent possible, push back on that, because the purpose of these exemptions or waivers that are in place are to allow institutions to reduce barriers that students faced as it related to specifically TSI testing. So it's counterproductive to say you're only going to do TSI scores. Now, if on the faculty and staff side, when you were having those critical conversations about what the data shows and the experience of faculty in the classroom, and the student experience and what's in the best interest of the student, it was decided that we're only going to use the TSI scores because we trust that as an indicator of college readiness, and we're going to work through that. I find that to be an appropriate decision to do that. But
yeah, I was unclear. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was unclear. It's not that we use holistic measures in addition to TSIA scores, but if we did not have a TSIA score for a student, then we were not allowed to, place them.
Exactly, and that was the express purpose of the waiver in terms of.
Yeah, and that's what we tried explaining, but there was no getting past it. She would not sign off on that, so.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's where we don't like to see students get caught in the crosshairs because, again, the expressed purpose of the waivers were particularly for those that were having trouble gaining access to TSI testing. And then it was more broadly applied because if we're going to allow students without TSI scores to be placed using these set of waivers, it was only fair that even if a student had taken a TSIA test, that they were not penalized and didn't have those same options to be placed in a college level course or without support or in a co-requisite model than a student that just didn't have a TSIA score. So that was the rationale behind that. And I'm a little saddened to hear that.
So are we. It made for a rough summer, but it did get us to figuring out how to get students TSI tested, so.
Oh, and while, as a sidebar, so if you interact or you have roles with your TSI, with your testing center, just remind them. So we have a couple of options available for students to take the TSIA. So students can be administered the TSIA via virtual web chat services, and that's directly through your testing centers, where through Zoom, GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams, BlueJean, whatever virtual web chat service, they can use that to actually use their testing center personnel to actually proctor the TSIA. And the College Board, our test vendor, has provided the test center directors with very detailed criteria and requirements as it relates to administering the TSIA via that method. Additionally, students can take the TSIA via a virtual remote proctoring service called Exemptions. So in advance, if you mention Exemptions to your testing center director and it's something they use, reiterate to them that only the live version of Exemptions can be used for proctoring. So only the Exemptions live virtual remote proctoring service can be used, although they offer 2 additional services, which are automated proctoring, which uses artificial intelligence to proctor the exam. That is not allowed to be used for the TSIA. And I know we've had some concern across the state, just in terms of our K-12 partners, a couple of our higher ed partners reaching out to us for clarification regarding these options that are available within the platform, which is a larger context, but I'm not gonna go too deep into that. But know that the only options to administer the TSIA, if your testing center is open, the students can definitely come in and take the test, hopefully exercising all social distance protocols. And on top of that, we have virtual web chat services available. And again, that's through your testing center. And the only remote proctoring service that's available virtually is through Exemptions, and it's only the live version where a human is proctoring the test through that service. Say any additional comments?
One last question.
Questions?
Well, we knew this would come up. Why is there a request to move to 100% if it's not required by the registrar?
So when we look at the data, most recently we presented data on in our major policy discussion in January. And again, I keep referring to all of these webinars, but the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board meeting in January of 2020, Dr. Suzanne Morales-Bell, Dr. Toby Park, and Drs. Jody Marin, and I'm forgetting her colleague's name at Kingsville, but they participated in a major policy discussion, particularly surrounding developmental education in the state of Texas. And the trend data that we're seeing for Texas is students are being successful. So we're trying to make sure that institutions move in the direction of what's happening nationally, but first and foremost in terms of what's best practice. We're trying to get institutions to further invest resources, and I know I say that not sitting in a vacuum or from a space of being naive, but continue to invest resources in continuous improvement and refinement of DE supports to aid students in being successful in those first college level courses. We, as educators, we're challenged every day in the classroom, and I want to thank you for definitely heeding the call of what you do in those spaces. So if you are faculty, definitely my hat's off to you, particularly in this time of COVID. But as we move forward, we need to make sure that we're implementing our curricula options and best practice with what's happening nationally. And on top of that, what's data driven. And from our assessment of our fall 2018 data alone, we saw a number of students who would traditionally not be in a college level course in their initial semester of college succeed. It was something along the number of, I think it was over 10,000 when we looked at the year. So we're seeing that students can be successful in first college level courses in their gateway courses when provided the necessary support. So what does that look like? Taking away essentially the standalone developmental education option now means that institutions will be focusing on what type of intervention is best for what student in conjunction with that college level course. A number of institutions are still offering the traditional ALP model, 3 hours of developmental education, 3 hours of college level course. And that's even for students who are what we consider bubble students who might have missed the TSI benchmark by 1 or 2 points. So now we want institutions to really start in an effort to reduce, again, the barriers to attendance, the time and effort students have to spend in the classroom, incorporating more non-course-based options, providing a granular, more variety, or as Dr. Morales-Bell says, more flavors of developmental education for students to help them be successful. So this is a firsthand story that I heard when I was doing a site visit at a community college. I was actually observing the DE portion of a co-requisite course, and a student was kind of flustered at the end of class, and she was expressing to her professor that, I don't know who does this TSI stuff, but they need to do their job better. And I'm looking at the colleague who I was with for the day, and I'm like, please don't turn around and say that that's me. But for the student's perspective, after the class, I talked to the professor. I was like, hey, so what was going on with that? And professor was like, that's one of my star students. Like, she always finishes her work very fast. She even helps other students. So she's able to help me tutor other students. And my first question was, is she being paid as a supplemental instructor? And the instructor looked at me and I was like, well, I don't think her angst was, this is not beneficial to me. I think her angst was, there's something else I could be doing with my time. And that comes where we as educators and we as the gatekeepers to a certain extent have to step back and really start to think of the student experience as well. That 3 hours that the student is paying for, that she might need 1 hour, that's 2 hours of credit that she's paying for, that's adding to the burden of obtaining her college credential. So when we look at states like Florida that have opt-in policies for developmental education, all of the data is still trending upward. Now, this is the caveat, and this is where I'll jump ahead against what some might say. Anytime you scale up in an option, you're going to see probably a dip in your overall success rates of your first college level courses. But at the end of the day, when we look at this from an equity perspective, and we look at those students that you've now passed a statistics course, you've now passed a contemporary math course in your first semester in a co-requisite model, and that's the only math course you need, you're now persisting on towards your degree versus being stuck in a truncated developmental education model. That we know the data time after time tells us that it's like 30% of the students that are in 2 sequence courses make it through. And that's where we have to step back. And even when we grit our teeth that I just don't think this is best, really hunker down and focus on those supports that can help the student be successful. And I'll stop on the soapbox there. And say we're at the about the 5-minute mark remaining in this session. Are there any additional questions, comments? And feel free to unmute yourself if you have some. Oh, the last thing I wanted to share. On testing center directors have already been notified of our upcoming TSIA2 beta testing period. So from October 1st through November 15th, full-time faculty employed or faculty employed at Texas Public Institutions of Higher Education will have the opportunity to participate in TSIA2 beta testing. In order to be eligible, you have to, of course, be a faculty member at a Texas Public Institution of Higher Education, and particularly targeting those faculty that teach reading, writing, or math-intensive gateway courses and or developmental education courses. And on top of that, due to security, for security purposes, the beta testing option is only available for in-person testing at your institution of higher education's testing center. So in advance, we know that a variety of institutions offer the TSIA, and unfortunately, if the testing center has not resumed in-person testing to some capacity, the option would not be available for those faculty. And we have to stick to that just to our security guidelines and protocols that have been set forth by and established by the College Board to deliver this opportunity. So October 1st through November 15th, TSIA2 beta testing. We will be sending out a Gov delivery, and I'm responding to Linda's comment. I just saw it. How do faculty register? I'll be sending out a Gov delivery to all of those who follow our TSI listserv, and it goes very wide. If you don't subscribe to our TSI listserv, go to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board website, find the Developmental Education page, and it's the first option that you have. It'll say, click here for TSIA updates or something to that effect. And you'll get that notice, or you can contact your testing center director. You can contact your testing center director directly. That's what I was trying to say. And they will have the information regarding the form that you have to fill out and submit to the College Board. Once that information is verified, you will be provided with a voucher and additional instructions on what exactly you need to do. And then again, it's only available if you can schedule in person at your institution's testing center. And one thing I'll do, I'll put the links to the TSI and DE updates to where you can subscribe to our listserv, as well as I'll link the calculation worksheets under support in those first slides. So it'll be a hyperlink, and I'll PDF this slide deck, and I will send it out to you today, later this afternoon. And you know what? Let me not hold myself to that. At latest tomorrow, I want to make sure, because I know you all will email me and hold me to that. So everybody that registered, I'll make sure you get a copy of this email presentation by tomorrow. And by, I'll probably say the end of the week, this full recording will be posted to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's YouTube page under DEPS 2020 webinar. So if there are no additional questions, we do thank you for joining us today. I thank my colleagues, Dr. Yuji Kim, Dr. Melissa Humphreys for joining us. And again, if you have any questions regarding the DEPS, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. You all have a great day. I hope you stay safe, be blessed, and stay vigilant. You all have a great day. Goodbye.